everybody, I'm back. Today is going to be deep, so buckle in. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. I'm your cult leader, Leah. Today is Wednesday, which means I will be doing my nails, doing my fill, and telling you about the latest book I've read. Now, today's book, we're actually not going to do the whole book because there's no way. It's too long, it's too deep. There's no way you could do it in 2 videos. I don't even think you could do it in 10 videos. So, we are going to do just the first chapter of this book, The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. Very smart man. And yeah, so we're going to do just the first chapter. And I'm going to fill my nails, and I think I'm going to do just something a little just kind of strange and abstract, to go with our abstract thinking. And the first thing I'm going to do is shorten these because they're getting a little long, even for me. Okay, so today's discussion is on The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene, and we are going to be doing just the first chapter, and that chapter is entitled Master Your Emotional Self, or The Law of Irrationality. I feel very shaky today. I feel nervous. Why am I so nervous? I think it's probably the subject matter we're going to talk about today. I want to make sure I do it right, I do it justice. So I think that's why I'm a little nervous and shaky. Or maybe I'm hungry. I don't know why. It's very difficult to do this part and talk at the same time. So I'm going to trim these first, and then we'll get into our book discussion. Okay, trimmed. I don't know why that part stresses me out a little. Okay, here we go. So this book starts out by telling us that, it doesn't come naturally, but if we can think instead of react to our emotions, if we can open our minds to what is really happening instead of to what we are feeling about what is happening, we can realize our greatest potential. Wow, that's big. To realize your greatest potential, I feel like there's very few people who have lived on this planet who've probably done that. And the ones who have, they're the ones we've heard of. Those are the people you know and who have lasted, through history. So in the next chapter, the author tells us about the goddess Athena and about our inner Athena. And he gets into this by sharing some stories from history. So one day in the year 432 BC in Athens, Greece, representatives from their arch enemy, Sparta, had arrived in town. And they wanted new terms of their peace treaty. If Athens did not agree to their terms, then Sparta would declare war. Now, Athens was a league of democratic states, but Sparta was a military state. So the Athenian assembly gathered to debate what to do, whether they should go to war with their enemy, whose forces were nearly unbeatable, or accept their peace terms, which would only show fear and embolden their enemies. So a politician named Pericles joined the debate. Many people respected him. He had done a lot of good for Athens, including having a statue of the goddess Athena built. Athena was the goddess of wisdom and practical intelligence. She represented all of the values Pericles wanted to promote. At the assembly, he said that it would be a dangerous precedent if they gave in to the Spartans' demands and threats. I mean, where would it end, right? But a direct battle with Sparta would be suicide. He suggested that they bring all their citizens within the walls of Athens, let the Spartans come and try to lure them into fighting, but they would not take the bait. The Spartans will grow frustrated by the lack of battle. Having to feed and supply their standing army, they would run out of money. The war would then become discredited among their citizens, and then a real lasting peace could be agreed upon. He also said that the only way that this would work is if the assembly promised not to try and add to the empire and spread themselves too thin while the war was in progress. What he really feared was not the enemy's strategy, but their own irrational mistakes. But things did not go according to the way Pericles had envisioned. Sparta did not grow frustrated with the lack of battle, and the siege dragged on. It was actually the Athenians that became discouraged and impatient. Then a plague entered the city, and with everyone living in such close proximity, because everyone was inside the walls of the city, a third of the citizens died, and even Pericles caught the disease. And as he laid there dying, the people descended into panic. So the assembly decided to take the opposite approach, as Pericles had suggested, and go on an offensive strategy, which gave the citizens great relief from their pent-up emotions of anxiety and impatience from a passive strategy. They would rather take any action than no action. So after years of war and suffering, Athenian leaders decided to take even bolder action and attack Sparta's ally and supplier of resources, Syracuse. This would do two things. It would deprive Sparta of resources it needed to continue the war, and as a sided benefit, it would add to their empire. But of course, this didn't go according to the plan. Sparta sent reinforcements to defend Syracuse, and Athens began to lose. Then a rumor reached Athens that they were losing, and slowly panic sets in again. And when the rumor was confirmed, Athens seemed doomed. They were drained of money, ships, and men, so wasn't looking good at all. Then finally, in 405 BC, Athens officially lost the war and had to agree to the harsh terms of peace imposed by Sparta. Their great democratic empire was over forever. The man who had curbed their most dangerous emotions of aggression, greed, hubris, and selfishness had been gone from the scene for too long, and his wisdom long forgotten. So how do we interpret this true story? Pericles knew that most Athenians thought of themselves as rational, but were not rational at all, but selfish and shrewd. Their decisions were based on emotions, their hunger for power, attention, and money. Pericles came to the conclusion that the human mind has to worship something. It has to have its attention directed at something that it values above all else. For most people, it's their ego. For some, it's family or God or their nation or money. For Pericles, it was nous. Nous is the Greek word for mind or intelligence. Nous is a force that permeates the universe. Some people call it universal intelligence. This is also the source of your own personal intelligence. And this nous that he worshipped was embodied in the goddess Athena. Athena represented a very particular form of intelligence, an intelligence that is practical, feminine, and earthly. She is the voice that comes to heroes in times of need, instilling in them a calm spirit, pointing their minds towards the perfect idea for victory and success, and then gives them the energy to achieve this. It's her spirit that guides great generals and the best artists, inventors, and tradespeople. Athena stands for rationality, the greatest gift that the gods had given to mortals, and it alone can make a human act in divine wisdom. So to cultivate his inner Athena, Pericles trained himself to never react in the moment, to never make a decision while under the influence of a strong emotion. Instead, he analyzed his feelings. Sometimes he would spend days alone calming himself down, and then the voice of Athena, or rationality, could be heard without the noise of his own thoughts about his emotions. He decided to base all of his political decisions on one thing: what would actually serve the greater good of Athens. Having such a standard helped him avoid the ego trap. To help himself in this process, he opened his mind to as many ideas and opinions and options as possible. He imagined all of the possible consequences of a strategy before committing to it. So how does this all apply? Well, you and I are no different than anyone else. You think you're rational, but you're not. You're not. Rationality is something you acquired through training and patience. Rationality is a higher power that exists within you right now, but you can't connect to it because your mind is weighed down with emotions. You are continually reacting to what other people give you. Excitement, insecurity, and anxiety makes it hard to focus. And without a rational standard to guide your decisions, you never quite reach the goals you have set. Rationality should be what you value the most, and that will serve as your guide. Your first task is to examine the emotions that are continually influencing your decisions. Learn to question yourself. Emotions tend to narrow the mind, making us focus on one or two ideas that satisfy our immediate desire for power or attention, but usually backfire. You will have to deliberate longer before acting and reassess your strategies, kind of like an athlete training. Your mind will become more flexible and resilient. So what's the keys to our nature we need to take away here? Whenever something goes wrong in our life, we seek an explanation. These explanations tend to intensify our emotions of anger, frustration, and depression, which we can then wallow in and feel sorry for ourselves. Our first reaction is to look outward for the cause. But generally, what leads to our bad decisions and miscalculations is our own irrationality, to the extent which our minds are controlled by our emotions. But we can't see this. The first step toward becoming rational is to understand our fundamental irrationality. To some extent, our irrationality is a function of the structure of our brains. It is wired into our very nature as a protection mechanism by the way we process emotions. For millions of years, living organisms depended on finely tuned instincts for survival. There was no separation between an impulse to do an action and the action. Then slowly, for some animals, this sensation evolved into something larger, and it took longer, a feeling of fear. Okay, so now we kind of have to understand our brains a little bit here. The human brain is composed of 3 parts. The reptilian brain controls all automatic responses that regulate the body, so the instinctive part. Then the limbic brain governs feelings and emotions. Then the neocortex is the part that controls cognition and language, or the part that, does the actual thinking and problem solving. Because our emotions are processed in a different part of the brain than our language and our problem solving area, it can be hard to understand and express our emotions properly. We think we feel one way, but usually the source of our emotions is something different. These two ways of relating to the world, emotionally or linguistically, are not connected in our brains. The split between our emotions and our cognition or our thinking is a cause of constant internal friction, which creates a second emotional self within us that operates beyond our will. I think this is what some people call the ego. We dwell on our fears, intensifying them and making them last well past the moment of perceived danger, even to the point of constant anxiety. So now, how can you tell if someone is a rational or irrational person? So it's important to judge this over time. Can they sustain success and hit upon several good strategies? Can they adjust and learn from their failures? Rational people can readily admit their own irrational tendencies. On the other hand, irrational people become highly emotional and defensive when challenged about the source of their emotions and actions. They are incapable of introspection and learning, and the mistakes just make them increasingly defensive. Pericles wanted the energy that comes with impulses and emotions to serve our thinking mind. That was his vision of rationality and should be our ideal. To acquire rationality is a 3-step process. First, we must become aware of what we call low-grade irrationality. This is our moods and feelings that we experience below the level of consciousness. Second, we must understand the nature of what is called high-grade irrationality. This occurs when our emotions become inflamed and we find it hard to control ourselves. Third, we need to enact certain strategies and exercises that will strengthen the thinking part of our brain and give it more power. So let's go through each of these steps a little closer. So step 1, we have to recognize our biases. Emotions continually affect our thoughts and our decisions below our level of awareness. So the most common emotion is our desire for pleasure and our avoidance of pain, whether it's mental or physical. And this is called the pleasure principle. Our thinking is the source of all of our biases. If you think that you are somehow immune to any of the following biases, that is an example of the pleasure principle working. So the first one is confirmation bias. This is where we say to ourselves that I look at the evidence and I come to my conclusions through more or less rational processes. We have an idea and convince ourselves that we arrived at it rationally. Then we go in search of evidence to support our view. I mean, what could be more scientific and objective, right? But because of the pleasure principle and its unconscious influence on us, we manage to find the evidence that confirms what we believe. We unconsciously veer towards information that confirms a positive result without even realizing it. You can observe confirmation bias in others by taking a look at their theories that seem to be too good to be true. Statistics and studies are not difficult to find once you are convinced of the rightness of your argument. Okay, so these are filled, and I think we are going to take a break there because I'm hungry. I need to eat something before I finish these. Maybe my hands will stop shaking then. So we will finish the design work and the filing first, and then we will also finish our self-discovery here. We will finish with the biases and the 3-step process to bring us more into rationality and our inner goddess Athena. If you liked this video, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. It helps me decide what kind of videos to make. Make sure and subscribe and hit the notifications bell so that you'll know when I upload new videos. You're not going to want to miss on this very deep, very heavy information. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.